And I'll get into the video. I'll be causing a bit of disturbance. All right. Right now, Billings, Montana is a statement, right? Beautiful place, but it's a Freedomville, like described. Let's get into it. And always turn it 5 to 1.75. And I'm always self-aware. I'm trying to build up a channel. When I say Billings, Montana is a black hole, it's a phenomenon in trucking that you will run into. There are certain places where freight goes in, and good luck getting a decent load out of there. You know, Florida's another one. There is freight in Denver, but it's usually really crappy, low-paying loads. So for these particular, the best thing you can do is get a load. If you have to unload something there, only part of your load unloads there. And like, let's just say I started out in Columbus, Wisconsin, picking up a load. And then the next part of the load gets picked up in Nevada, Iowa. And then after that, kind of zigzag your way towards, you got to kind of make this way, that way to make your way up towards the I-90, I-94. Actually, that'd be the I-90 in that case. And from the I-90, you're basically just, I'll cover the 222. It's a bypass to avoid a big dip there. But you get to Billings. And by the way, Billings itself, nice place. It's okay. You can see it still has some industrial qualities about itself. There's still refineries. I remember occasionally I'd go through there and you'd see this giant sky candle where I don't know what was going on at the refinery, but you would basically be burning off something huge. And it'd be like, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Way back in the day, actually, another place that doesn't exist anymore out near Butte, there's the Anaconda situation. When I was a little kid, yeah, you want to talk about something crazy. You look out there and you'd see this giant flaming candle. And I don't think it was the Anaconda smelter because that was shut down well by the time I was a little kid. Well, it was the 90s. So whatever they were doing out there was huge. But as far as Butte goes, mid-grade parking, there's places you can hide a park on the streets. And, there's decent Walmarts. As far as trucks, the town pumps, and I will state this to the end of my days, it probably, as far as truck stops go, and I probably shouldn't say this, has some of the best beer selection I've ever seen. As far as, like they have the East meets West quality of regular domestics, and then of course they have the crafts, and then they have, your popular stuff, and then your trash stuff. And then at the end of every shopping aisle, they have a pyramid. And the pyramids, it's just like, it's a great use of space, by the way. But just really good place. And if you happen to fuel up at Pilot Flying J, well, then the town pumps are affiliated, so you can get showers all the same there. So from my perspective, it's not the worst place to be stuck for a bit. The problem is that as far as a load, if you fully unload in a place like Billings, good luck getting a decent load out of there. And there's been a number of times where companies have told me, yeah, just deadhead all the way back down to this other state. And for those that don't know what deadhead means, that's where you have an empty trailer and you just go to where they are because they've got a hot load somewhere else. And they're like, it's going to cost us more in time and money to have you sit there, because like, look, I'm making how much per day for doing nothing. Okay. But they're losing how much per hour for me doing nothing because, there's the loads that I generally would get out of Butte would be like pallets, assuming that you could get them. And then, more than I could say, probably 5 times that I fully unloaded in Butte, I basically did not get a load that was in that town. And I had to drive like 300 miles or longer to get something out of there. The way to do a place like Butte, and more or less if you're a company driver, you just kind of drive where they take you, is the drive-by loads. These black hole zones in America, that's the way you handle them. In the sense that You get a load where you unload, like the place that I used to unload, I think it was US Foods, or was it Cisco? I can't remember. It was over by that cemetery. Those type of places, when they have a multi-drop load. So basically, you picked up 2 loads from Wisconsin, one in Wisconsin, one in Ohio, and then you're unloading part of it in Butte, or not Butte, but Billings. Strangely enough, I don't think I've ever actually unloaded anything in Butte in all the time I've been there. And I don't know if I've ever unloaded anything in Missoula either. And you think I would have. And those two, they're big enough cities. But the next unload would generally be Spokane, or I like to call it Spokompton, because it used to be a lot worse. And after that, if the load's perfectious, you'll go all the way to Everett, Washington. People are like, why do you want to go all the way out there? Because I love the drive. I love that particular area. I think it's absolutely beautiful out there. But yeah, I mean, it's a good load. It's a good, and here's the only thing about it. Multi-drop loads, the plus of them, if you actually own the company, they usually pay pretty good. And they allow you to avoid, because where you want to unload, Spokane isn't necessarily bad because there's a lot of potatoes and farm stuff out in the eastern Washington. Apple loads, like maybe you go over to Brewster, Washington, you do a few. There's generally with an apple load, the only downside to that is you load here, part of the load, then you go to this other fruit warehouse X far away, and you're getting paid either way. But preferably, I'd much rather unload in Everett, Washington. And why? Because I know there's street parking right around there. Or if I decide to, because this way you can avoid the traffic, depending on, if you can get that unload early enough, it's okay. But if you could park right at the facility because they're chill about it and you're just in the lineup with the other guys, you wake up whatever time in the morning, you drive up there, hand them your paperwork and just wait for them to get it done. And then you can ghost in there. So you don't have to start up your clock. And the beauty of that is then you can head up and get a reload. Either, I don't remember if it was like, it was down near the port of Tacoma, or you go north and you get a load of beef out of, strangely enough, actually, it wasn't just beef I got out of Bellingham. I got a lot of fucking fish, like leftover bits of salmon. And there was a mink farm out where in the part of Idaho where the terminal was. And so for me, it was like, whatever. The other load that I would commonly get, it's a couple loads actually, is I would occasionally go to the retirement zone of dairy cows. And for those that don't know, a dairy cow, if you'd be the best dairy cow in the world, your retirement plan is Taco Bell. That's your retirement plan. Sorry. And I take that load out to Wilder, Idaho from there. Now, the other one would be Fred Meyer. I think it was that down near Chehalis or something like that. I can't remember. I know where it is, but I just don't remember what the name of the town was. Kelso, something like that. And then depending on which way you go, you can get anywhere. Blast back off to, some part of Idaho, the western side of Idaho. Drop the trailer either at Wilder, Idaho, so they can make hamburgers out of dairy cows or, whatever, or Taco Bell. Or you basically take it, drop it at the terminal. And then assuming I had time and I could if they didn't need to do work on the truck, I would just be like, well, let's blast off somewhere else. Get me to some other part of the country. I don't want to stay here, And it was great, man. I really enjoyed it. It was good. But yeah, Billings, Montana, dude. Nice little town, few decent chicken joints. Any of those town pumps in Montana and the I-90, I don't know if it's as good as it used to be, but yeah, really good beer selection if you feel like having just grabbing a six, because you got the east meets west type of situation. But as far as freight getting out of Billings, Montana, good luck. You will probably end up deadheading because your time in that situation is worth more. And this is the same thing you could say sometimes. That Denver, you can get a load, but it's a crappy paying load. And the same thing could be said for pretty much Florida. Florida is a great example of and the problem with Florida, and I should cover this in another recording because there's some cool places out in the swamp, is that you get the load in, but then everybody during the winter wants to run the I-10 who owns their own trucks. So there's a flood of people that are willing to do it. I drive ice, not like ice road truckers, but like, you're up in the Dakotas driving across the country and it's -6 out. And you're like, you look at the dog and I'm like, you better crap fast, dude. But like, that's where the money's at. And that's where the paying loads are. Wherever people don't want to be, and it's somewhat dangerous, but I gotta be honest about it. Yeah, I have had my near misses where some crazy stuff has happened, and I recognize that. But on the other hand, I had one hell of an adventure. I mean, the whole Norman Rockwell view of America, where it's like, and here's like, okay, let me try to paint this picture for you before I take back off to go back out and weed my yard. You're going through Montana. The larches up on the mountains, they're like a needle tree, an evergreen that basically loses its needles. And they're long since lost their needles for the season. So you got the dark clouds, the gray, the really super green, and a little bit of the larches up there. You got that early snow, not the heavy snow of the heavy winter, but the early snow where you can still see the grass tips that are sticking up, a little ways. And there's still some aspens or cottonwoods that have some golden leaves on them, just a handful of it. And the colors fucking explode, and it's just the contrast of gray and green and bright yellows. It's amazing. And it's like, for the people that have never experienced America for what it is, or like if you live in Europe, you probably have something similar. If you live on the East Coast, you have leafing season. There's a little bit of magic in every part of the country, even the dead ass wastelands. If you're there long enough, you'll find it. And I don't know, man, I look at a lot of people that have lived a normal life and I think to myself, I'm like, what a waste. What a fucking waste. Because, to me, and just as a kind of a closing thought, death isn't what, when people die, okay, that's sad. But you always have their memories in your head. What I think is even sadder than death is the people who are alive and refuse to live. And there's times where you realize that with people. It's just like that, work the job, do this, sustain this, and then they get old and all they do is they try to make sure, conserve. It's like, fuck, I don't know if there's an afterlife, and I don't claim to have any grand answer on that. In fact, I don't even really care about the answer. But if this is all you got, go out and have some fun. Go out and do some exploration. This whole myopic outlook on life of just work, 65 now. We work toward death. Screw that shit. World's too big, beautiful place not to enjoy it. Take it easy. Why are you still doing that?